So, not in response, but AEW has been doing some pretty impressive things with the Continental Classic, which is a tournament to crown what they are deeming as the North American Triple Crown champion, which means that the winner of this tournament is going to attain the New Japan Pro Wrestling Strong Openweight Championship, the Ring of Honor World Championship, and AEW's new Continental Championship. And you're already seeing guys that are at the top of it's kind of, the tournament is very similar to the G1. Whitney calls it the AEW G1. But people that are at the top of this at this tournament are guys like John Moxley, Swerve, amongst others. So I wanted to kind of get your impression on this tournament, and do you think that this is creating compelling TV for All Elite Wrestling?
Well, dude, I have not been paying attention to AEW. No, I'm being honest. I've been paying attention more
Right.
like WWE. I'm not gonna lie to the audience or nothing, but so they get to win 3 titles by the end of this whole
Yes.
thing.
And the tournament culminates at AEW World's End, December 30th, at the Nassau Coliseum.
Ooh. Oh yeah, I didn't know that. Why did I act like I didn't know that? Um No, I think that's pretty cool. And it's funny how I was just dragging AEW not too long ago about how they treat ROH, and it's about time that
Mm.
the ROH belt gets more presentation on TV. So if they do achieve all 3 belts, do they finally bring those matches and those feuds that happens for ROH onto the screen? Do we get to see the belt more? What happens with that?
I would assume, considering that whomever is winning the championship is going to take all three titles, I feel like the champion would be on all three promotions, respectively, right? Because the strong title is New Japan's world heavyweight title. The ROH world title is their world heavyweight title. And then the Continental Championship, we don't know what that necessarily means in the context of AEW championships yet, because there hasn't been a champion crown yet. We don't know what that looks like, but I would assume that they will be on all three promotions. And because of that, the titles would also be seen on screen for AEW.
That's pretty cool, but I don't know how I am going to be excited for it because how do you book around having 3 titles? Does the next person
Mm.
that beat that individual that wins this whole tournament, when they have a title match, is it a title match for all 3 titles? Is this a tournament that only happens one time once a year and that person has these belts until the next tournament that's supposed to be next year? Did they ever announce what's supposed to be the structure? You're asking someone, by the way, who doesn't really watch G1s. I probably watched one whole G1 the entire time of my
Right.
life.
I mean, they haven't really announced if they're going to do this in the future, if this is going to be a recurring thing, like how they announced for like the Owen Hart Cup, right? But they just mentioned that it's going to be the North American Triple Crown champion, similar, and it's kind of influenced by like what was happening in Japan for like All Japan Pro Wrestling, I think it is, when like three titles were up for grabs at the end of a tournament. I don't know if this will always, if all titles will be defended for this, you know what I mean? If all titles would be defended at once every time the titles are on the line, or if it's just like three separate title matches. But I mean, I feel like it would probably be one of those like all titles are on the line if there's a title match type of situation, just because ain't nobody trying to be in three championship matches every month or every week or whatever the case may be. But you know, I think that that's kind of like the general idea or the general sense of it as far as
I'm
like the
just
AEW.
asking because they got all these belts. They got only 2 hours here, 2 hours on Saturday. How do you work this in to be meaningful? 'Cause I feel like if you're gonna come out of a tournament, yes, it's supposed to build someone else, build someone up, and put them over. But like it's the after the tournament that's a little bit
Mm,
more important for me. What do you do with
mhm,
that? Kind of like with like King of the Ring, for example. What does
right.
the person do with that King of the Ring gimmick that's going to elevate them and be
Mm,
like an interesting storyline for me to engage with as a fan, because you don't want none of those 3 belts to just not mean anything.
very true.
So that's just my only question. I have no doubt they're gonna have amazing matches, and it's gonna be a cool moment when you get all 3 belts. Because who doesn't like the visual of someone getting 3 belts? I love that shit when I saw it on Kota Ibushi. But
Mm,
my thing is that, like, what do they do afterwards to work it into their TV time? And I hope that they planned ahead of time for that,
right.
because I don't want anyone walking around with 3 belts and it just looks stupid. But do you have any opinions on the tournament, and you have a particular winner just looking at the match card?
So I love the tournament. Tony always does his big one with a tournament.
Right.
That's one thing I'm gonna say. I don't know. I don't know like what's in the water, but I just know that every time Tony says we're gonna do a tournament, he does his big one. So that's
Mhm.
number one. Number two, my odds on favorite is Swerve Strickland. He's my favorite.
Mm.
He currently is like second place in the gold league, I believe it is. But it's like he's clearly the most over person in the company right now. I feel like the tournament itself, it's great because we're getting matchups that we probably wouldn't see elsewhere. I also feel like it's doing a really good job at making certain other people feel important. For example, we had a Brian Danielson versus Andrade match when Andrade won. And that would not have happened, I think, in any other way. And at the same time, Brian Danielson did not look weak by losing that match. And he didn't look less dominant because he still has a certain amount of points.
Mhm.
Um, Swerve versus Jay White was another prime example. Swerve versus John Moxley was another great example because they were tied for points at one point, and then John Moxley kind of took the lead, right? But
Yeah.
Swerve didn't look weak losing that match because of how John Moxley won. So I feel like this tournament is doing a really good job at giving I guess, the underutilized talent more of a spotlight and giving them credible wins over big names so that when it's time for them to go for a main event push, they have the credibility to do so.
Yeah.
Um, as far as, yeah, so the winner I think is going to be Swerve. I agree with you though, because I'm curious to see how all the championships are going to kind of like work itself out or rank itself. I have an idea. My idea is that the AEW Continental Championship is exclusive to Collision.
Ooh.
I feel like I feel like ever since Punk left AEW, there's been a value void in Collision. And I feel like you get that momentarily a little bit when Adam Copeland shows up. But I feel like you would be able to add a lot more credibility to the show if you had a title that was exclusive to the show. And considering that you have wrestlers in this who were prior world champions in all different promotions, whether that be AEW, Ring of Honor, WWE, it seems as if you're giving this world championship importance. Now, you already have the AEW International Championship, you already have the TNT Championship, and the AEW World Championship, and you have not classified either of those championships as mid card titles, which is fine. But if you have a continental championship, now it's like, now it can be too much for one show. So I feel like if you want this to have a spotlight, make the title exclusive to Collision because I feel like that's a great way for it to attain value. I feel like that's a great way for uh, the title to have its own spotlight. Is if you were to just Collision um, give Collision the Continental Championship. But I want to know how y'all feel about the AEW Continental Classic and your impressions. Put in the comments below and let us know. But we're moving on